Build your low back without building your lower back. That's going to be the topic of this tutorial. We're going to be looking at 3 exercises and some progressions to be able to build your low back without building your low back. If you want to build your low back strength endurance, please do click the link below, go through to my How to Build Low Back Strength Endurance 12-week online program, where we do what we're going to be talking about in this tutorial, but also we're going to be looking at the whole system of the lower back and how we go about building it. Exercise number 1 is the bridge. Now, it's a very simple exercise. If you've watched any of my tutorials before, I like to keep it as simple as possible. There are some content creators out there that like to use the latest trend, but what I tend to find is that the fundamentals, the exercises that have stood the test of time, they are generally more than adequate for what we need them to be able to do. So the first exercise to build our lower back without building our lower back is the bridge. And what we need to do, so it is the traditional bridge where we come down, we have our feet sort of hip to shoulder width apart, and we lift up and we squeeze the hips. Now, the main things that we want to focus on when we're in this position is when we lift the hips, we get to the top and we squeeze through the glutes. What we're trying not to do is push too high to arch the back. That's the one thing we want to avoid, is the arching of the back. So we want to come up and we want to squeeze the glutes. The next thing we want to do is we want to brace the abdominals. Then bring the hands across the chest and hold here. Now, in this scenario, what you may find is that if it's somewhat challenging to be able to get into this position, you can use the elbows to help you not only support how much work the hips do, but also getting the hips into the right place. So you can push the elbows into the floor here. But otherwise, it would be arms across the chest, and then engaging the glutes and then tightening the abdominals. So that is exercise number 1. Now, what we've then got is a couple of progressions that can go with it. Now, the main focus on why we start with the double leg bridge is so we can get the squeeze of the hips. So what that then does is that allows us to move into the next stage, which is when we go up onto one leg. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a single leg bridge this time. So we're going to come into position. We're going to bring our feet and knees together. Now, what we've already done with the normal bridge is we've come up and we've got our hips engaged. So we've got our glutes squeezed so we can feel those. So that's the first part that we need to be able to do. We don't just come up and just go into this position, because what we may be missing is the conscious activation of the glute muscle. So we want to be able to feel the muscle working. If we're up in the position, it probably is working, but we want to be able to feel it consciously. So we come up, we get the squeeze. The next thing we do is we then lift the leg up and hold there, and we do exactly the same. We feel the squeeze in the hip, we feel the tightness of the abs, and we bring the arms across the chest. Again, if you need to, you can use the elbows to push into the floor like so, and then we hold. Then you would come down, and then you would go same on the other side. Now, when we take it into the next exercise, so we've got the double leg bridge where we can squeeze the hips. We've then got the single leg bridge, which is a little bit harder because it's one leg at a time, or one glute at a time that's activating. Now, from an activation perspective, we are going to be working on alternating between the two. So we're going to be adding a march into the bridge now. So this is, you could say it's another progression. In some ways, it's a little bit easier than the single leg bridge, but in other ways, it's a little bit harder than the single leg bridge. And it's harder because we're alternating the activation between the hips as we march. So what we would do is we would bring, again, we would have the feet relatively, we don't have to bring them completely close together, but we want to keep them close. So no wider than hip width apart. What we then do, same position, we come up, number 1, we need to get the squeeze. And then we lift, we go down, and now I'm activating this side. But again, activate this side. I want to be able to hold it, and I want to be able to feel that muscle contract. And the other thing is, when I do come up, is I want to be able to keep that hip up without arching the back, holding it there and in that position. And that's the bridge march. So that's the first, you could say that's the first exercise, the bridge, but with 2 extra progressions in the single leg bridge and the bridge with the march. But all the way through, we're activating the glutes, We're making sure we can feel it. We're bracing the abdominals to hold the body in position. We're not arching the back. And then we can use the elbows to support ourselves as well. For exercise number 2, we are going to be using a resistance band, and we're going to be putting it around the feet. And what we're going to be doing is what's called a monster walk. So we want the tension on the band. So we don't want our feet completely together, that they're slack in the band. We want our tension in the band. What we then do, hands on hips, again we have a little brace of the abdominals. It's not a heavy brace, but we are just bracing the abdominals. And then we take a step forward. It's about half to 1 foot length forwards. And then we take another one. And then we take another one. And then we take another one. So that's the exercise of the monster walk. Now, like the bridge, there's a few things that we need to be able to do. So the action, or the role of the muscles within this exercise, is to hold the foot in a nice straight line. So where in the bridge we were looking at the big glute max muscle at the back, what we're now doing is we're looking at glute medius and glute minimus on the sides. Now their role, as I mentioned, is to keep the foot in a nice straight line. Because what happens is most people, and they'll go like that. So as soon as they lift the foot off the floor, the muscle doesn't engage. It doesn't come in and hold the foot in place. So there's a moment where it's then got to catch up, and that's where the foot comes in. And then it comes back out like so. So they engage it as it comes back out. So it disengages on the way in and engages on the way out. Now again, that's only a split second. So what we want to be able to do is get the tension on the band, so the band wants to pull the foot in. What we're then able to do is come forward in a nice straight line. So as you lift, if you find your foot coming in and out like so, a nice easy fix for that is when you lift, aim to push your foot out. So although your foot won't go out, it will, because it wants to come in, but you're pushing out, it should stay on the same line. So as you come up, you push out, push out. So you're pushing your foot out as the band wants to pull it in. What that then allows you to do is come out in that straight line. So we're in this position. Again, it's only a half. If I go onto the side, you'll see, with regards to the body, slight bend of the knees, slight flex of the hip. So we're in that sort of hip hinged position. What we then do, step out. Again, you can see it's about half to 1 foot length, half to 1 foot length, half to 1 foot length, half to 1 foot length. So we would take those steps and we would go out. And what we're doing with this, with these, well, certainly this exercise, but the other 2 exercises, is we're stabilizing the pelvis, which then brings stability to the lumbar spine. So if we want to build the lower back, hip exercises are essential for it. If you're just focusing on multifidus, longissimus, the erector spinae type group, the QL, if you're just focusing on those, you're not going to be as in a good place as you would be if you included the hips. So again, we've got hands on hips, slightly flexed. We've got the abs braced, but only a light brace. And then we would walk across, turn around, walk across. And the whole time we do this, we want to be able to keep the feet in line so they're not going in and out. So the second exercise is the monster walk, and it's not necessarily a sort of a repetition type concentric eccentric contraction. It's more of a static contraction. So we want to be able to hold the feet in place, and the best way to do that is with a band around the feet, get your tension and perform the monster walks. The final exercise is the hip aeroplane. Now I'm going to do an easier exercise to start with, because the hip aeroplane can be somewhat difficult for someone who's just doing it for the first time. It requires a lot of balance, but what it also requires is mobility of the hip and stability of the hip as well to be able to perform the movement. So the hip aeroplane, as the exercise is we're in this position. You can use your arm for balance. You don't have to use it, but you can. That's where the aeroplane part comes from. Then we've got the hips that are level. What we then do is we rotate out. So that now again is contracting glute max, glute medius, or the posterior fibers of glute medius. We've also got to be able to balance in here. As you can see, my foot and knee are doing a bit of work. and then we come back down, we go into internal rotation, so we get that full length, full range of movement, and then we come back up. From the side, you can see that my knee doesn't really change anything. It stays locked in place, and then I just open out the shoulders, so shoulders and hips stay in line, and then we come down and we come up. So that's our hip aeroplane. What we're going to do now is just show you a simple way to make that a little bit easier. And it's basically stay still. So we're doing a static hold. So we're in this position and we're just holding that position there. So we can just hold, just get used to being in that position. Make sure the hip is down. We're not held open in this place, but we're down, hips are level, shoulders are level, arms are out if we need it for balance, and we just go into that position and hold the static hip aeroplane. So that's how we start that exercise. Now, if we want to then move into the movement part of it, very simply, we just start doing a movement. So we just do small movements. So we can either do, you've got two ways of doing this, doesn't really matter which one. You can either do going down into internal rotation and back up to the middle, down into internal rotation and back up through the middle, down into internal rotation and back up through the middle. Or, as you've probably worked out, from the middle, external, to back to the middle, external, back to the middle. And you can even do just short movements as well. So it could just be just halfway and out. So it's just a nice short movement, or you can do a short movement. You don't have to do the full movement, but build up to the full movement and then you build into the full hip aeroplane. So with regards to the hip aeroplane, main things we want is soft knee, flex of the hip, straight leg at the back, holding hips level, shoulders level, and then when we rotate, you go full external rotation, full internal rotation, maintaining balance, maintaining stability, again, working on the glute medius, glute minimus muscles of the hip, which again is going to work with the glute max from the bridge and other exercises. There are more. This isn't the definitive amount of exercises, but that will help you build your low back without building your low back. If you've enjoyed this content, please do hit the like button. If you've learned something new, hit the thanks button. If you've got a comment or a question, please do leave it in the comment section below. And if you want to watch more tutorials like this, hit the subscribe button and the bell icon.